There's been a lot of talk of late within wider society about the impacts of misogyny on young women and girls. This has gone as far as governmental levels. So the Women and Equalities Committee have had a huge focus on how to reduce misogyny in wider society. This is off the back of various reports, one of them being the Ofsted report into sexual harassment in schools that came out in 2021 that told us that sexual harassment and misogyny is a big issue for young people. One of the main focus that has been on young men and boys and how we can talk to them to help reduce misogyny, just so that everybody can flourish. Misogyny within society is framed as something that's really detrimental to women and girls, and it is. You know, there's this framework that we're situated within that sees women and girls as subordinate. However, there isn't any focus on the impact of misogyny on young men and boys, and that's never talked about. You know, that they're stuck within these patriarchal structures, these misogynistic landscapes that we live within. And it's damaging to them as well because they sit within a hierarchy of masculinity, of having to prove themselves constantly, of not being able to show emotion, not being able to show vulnerability. We've only got to look at poor male mental health outcomes, you know, and the issues around that with young men and boys to show that there's an issue there. So from my position, and looking at this academically, more work has to be done with men and boys because misogyny is also damaging them. One of the key areas that needs targeting in terms of reducing misogyny and allowing safe spaces for young people to speak and negotiate the world that they live in at the moment is really good, robust relationships and sex education in schools. At the moment, relationships and sex education, whilst part of the curriculum, a compulsory part of the curriculum, is not up to scratch. We're not listening to young people, we're not addressing their needs. We need to be addressing these issues, especially around misogyny, in these safe spaces. But from my experience and in the research that I've carried out, young people often stick to a social script and they say what they think you want to hear rather than unpicking the real issues. So tackling misogyny and talking to young men and boys does have a big place within relationships and sex education, but it's got to be done correctly. There are things that teachers and parents and professionals can do to talk to boys and men about misogyny, but I think before you even do that, you've got to explore your own feelings about young men and boys and misogyny. You know, quite often now the lines are blurred between masculinity and misogyny, but we have to remember these are distinctly different things. To be masculine or to have a masculinity or to have an identity within masculinity is not a bad thing. Traits that are quite often associated with masculinity, such as being dominant, assertive, powerful, they're not inherently bad. Those traits are not bad on their own. You know, so for example, if my house was on fire and I called the fire service, I would want somebody to turn up that leads a team of people, that is assertive, dominant, powerful, shows leadership qualities and puts the fire out. It doesn't matter what gender they are. But so just giving that as an example shows that masculine identity and these traits that are often identified alongside masculinity are not bad, but they're often confused with misogyny. And I think we have to first, as parents, carers, professionals, take a step back and think of our own position. Do we instantly blame men and boys for the problems with misogyny? And if we do, that shuts down any conversation and communication that can be had to solve the issue. Another thing that you can do is create spaces and allow young men and boys to say how they really feel. Quite often, and in the research that I've done with young people, they tell us that when they work with professionals or when they talk to parents and carers or teachers, they often say what they think that the person wants to hear. Whereas in my experience, once you start unpicking these issues, they really do want to talk about how they feel. But you might not like what they're saying, you might not like how they're feeling, but this is the first step, is to find out the truth behind how they feel and gently unpick that with them. The final point that I want to make is that young people and young men and boys are the experts in the world that they live in today. Quite often, in my experience, we tackle issues relating to young people and we talk over the tops of their heads. We don't ask them. They should be spearheading these discussions. A lecture format doesn't work. We have to remember as professionals, parents and carers and teachers that we must always approach this topic with compassion and allow boys to thrive within society today. That should be our utmost goal. And we have to remember that misogyny hurts everyone, all genders. Nobody's winning at the moment, but what we have to remember and what is key is that we're all in this together.